Imagine the year 1618. Europe is on the brink of a conflict that will leave it scarred for decades. This is the beginning of the 30 Years' War. The stage for this brutal conflict was set in the heart of the Holy Roman Empire, modern-day Germany. Yet the flames of this war would soon engulf all of Europe. The war had its roots in a volatile mix of religious tensions, dynastic ambitions, and a power struggle among the European states. In the heart of Bohemia, the spark that would ignite this war was lit. The event known as the Defenestration of Prague marked the start of the Bohemian phase, the first stage of this long and devastating conflict. On that fateful day, Protestant nobles rose in rebellion against Catholic Habsburg rule, expressing their defiance by tossing representatives out of a window. This act, as dramatic as it was, represented a boiling over of the religious and political struggles that had been simmering beneath the surface in Bohemia. As the war raged on, the Battle of White Mountain loomed on the horizon. This battle, fought in 1620, was a pivotal moment in the Bohemian phase. The Catholic forces emerged victorious, strengthening the grip of the Habsburg rule over the region. The Protestants, who had so defiantly protested against Catholic rule, were now under their control. This victory not only marked a turning point in the war, but also set the stage for the religious and political dynamics that would define the following phases of the conflict. The Battle of White Mountain in 1620 marked a turning point, strengthening Catholic control and setting the stage for the next phase of the conflict. And so, the stage was set. The onset of chaos had begun, and Europe was on a path that would lead to decades of war, devastation, and change. The Bohemian phase was but the first act in this grand play of power, faith, and ambition that was the 30 Years' War. By 1625, the war had drawn in Denmark, a nation eager to support Protestant interests. Denmark, under King Christian IV, saw the war as an opportunity to bolster Protestant influence and potentially extend its own territories. Christian IV, a Lutheran, was not just the King of Denmark but also the Duke of Holstein within the Holy Roman Empire, making his involvement in the conflict both personal and political. Denmark's entrance into the 30 Years' War marked the beginning of what we now refer to as the Danish phase. Christian IV led his forces south into the territories of the Catholic League, sparking a series of bloody conflicts with the Catholic forces led by the Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II and his chief military commander, Albrecht von Wallenstein. However, despite Denmark's fervor and initial successes, the Danish forces were ultimately outmatched. The combined strength and strategic prowess of the imperial forces led to a series of Danish defeats. The Battle of Lutter in 1626 was particularly devastating, with the Danish army suffering a crushing loss. These military setbacks, coupled with the pressures of economic strain, forced Denmark to reconsider its position. The Peace of Lübeck in 1629 marked the end of the Danish phase. This treaty essentially forced Denmark to withdraw from the war. In exchange, Denmark's sovereignty was recognized, and King Christian IV was allowed to retain his control over Danish territories, but with the understanding that Denmark would no longer interfere in the empire's religious conflicts. The Peace of Lübeck was a decisive victory for the Catholic forces. It not only ended Denmark's intervention but also reaffirmed Catholic dominance within the Holy Roman Empire. This was a significant turning point in the war, further tipping the scales in favor of the Catholics. Yet it's crucial to remember that this was just one phase in a war that spanned over 3 decades. The Danish phase ended with a reaffirmation of Catholic dominance, but the war was far from over. The ripples of this conflict continued to spread, pulling more nations into the fray and setting the stage for the next phase of the war. In 1630, a new player entered the stage, Sweden, under the leadership of King Gustavus Adolphus. This marked the beginning of what would come to be known as the Swedish phase of the 30 Years' War. Gustavus Adolphus, a visionary and a military genius, was determined to intervene on the side of the Protestants. Gustavus Adolphus was not just any king, he was a military innovator who introduced battlefield tactics that were ahead of his time. His reforms ranged from the structure of the army, introducing a more flexible and smaller unit known as the brigade, to the use of mobile artillery on the battlefield. His innovative tactics and the disciplined Swedish troops often caught their opponents off guard, leading to several significant victories. One of the most notable battles of this phase was the Battle of Lutzen in 1632. Gustavus Adolphus led his troops into battle, demonstrating his characteristic bravery and tactical brilliance. However, the fog of war is unpredictable. and in the thick of the battle, the Swedish king was tragically killed. His death was a significant blow to the Swedish army and the Protestant cause. Yet, his legacy lived on. His strategies and tactics continued to be employed, allowing the Swedes to maintain their momentum. After Gustavus's death, Sweden continued to fight, making significant gains. Their efforts culminated in the Peace of Prague in 1635, which marked the end of Sweden's direct involvement in the war. However, the peace terms were less than ideal for the Swedes. Their territorial gains were not recognized, and they were left feeling unsatisfied. Despite their leader's death and their subsequent exit from the war, Sweden had significantly shifted the balance of power. Gustavus Adolphus's military innovations had not only led to battlefield successes, but also had a lasting impact on warfare. His death, while a setback, did not diminish Sweden's influence. The Swedish phase of the 30 Years' War had come to an end, but the ripples of Sweden's involvement were felt long after they had left the battlefield. France, concerned about the growing Habsburg power, entered the war in 1635, marking the beginning of the French phase. With their entry, the 30 Years' War, previously a largely religious conflict, took a dramatic turn. The war now became a chessboard for European powers, each maneuvering for greater control and influence. France, though a Catholic country, sided with the Protestants. This may seem puzzling at first, but the motive was crystal clear: to curb the Habsburgs' dominance. The French, under the astute leadership of Cardinal Richelieu and later Cardinal Mazarin, knew that a powerful Habsburg empire straddling Europe was a threat to French sovereignty. So they fought not for religious freedom, but for the balance of power in Europe. The war was a grinding, brutal affair. The armies crisscrossing Europe were like a plague, bringing destruction, famine, and death. As the war raged on, the lines between friend and foe, between right and wrong, blurred. Yet amid all the chaos, diplomats from various nations were busy behind the scenes, trying to negotiate a peaceful resolution. Finally, in 1648, after 13 long years of French involvement and relentless negotiations, the Peace of Westphalia was signed. The peace treaty, comprising the Treaty of Munster and the Treaty of Osnabrück, was a turning point in European history. It recognized the independence of the Dutch Republic and Switzerland from the Holy Roman Empire. It modified the principle of cuius regio, eius religio, allowing rulers to choose their state religion. It also weakened the Holy Roman Empire's central authority, granting more power to individual states within the empire. The Peace of Westphalia marked the end of the 30 Years' War. But the war had taken its toll. Europe was ravaged, its people weary and traumatized. Yet, the war also paved the way for a new order. It marked the beginning of the modern state system, and laid the foundation for future international diplomacy. With the Peace of Westphalia, the 30 Years' War finally came to an end, but not without leaving a lasting impact. The war changed the political and religious landscape of Europe, setting the stage for future conflicts and shaping the world we live in today. The end of the war didn't mean the end of suffering. Europe had been left in ruins. In the aftermath of the 30 Years' War, the landscape of the continent was forever altered, both physically and metaphorically. The war had been a maelstrom of destruction, leaving in its wake a trail of desolation and grief that would take generations to heal. The economic impact was significant. Trade routes were disrupted, cities and towns were razed, and agriculture was severely affected. The result was a widespread economic collapse, a devastating blow to a continent already reeling from the costs of war. Famine, a cruel and relentless companion to war, settled over the land. The scarcity of food and other resources exacerbated the suffering of the people, making survival a daily struggle. But the most poignant cost of the war was the staggering loss of life. It is estimated that up to 8 million people perished, either directly in battle or from the diseases and starvation that followed. This loss was not just a number. It represented fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. It represented generations of knowledge, culture, and potential, wiped out in just 3 decades. Yet from this crucible of conflict emerged significant political and religious changes. The Peace of Westphalia, which marked the end of the war, introduced revolutionary concepts in state sovereignty and diplomacy. The principle of cuius regio, eius religio, was modified, allowing rulers to choose their state religion, thereby acknowledging the diversity of faiths within the empire. This shift marked a significant step towards religious tolerance. Furthermore, the war weakened the central authority of the Holy Roman Empire, granting more power to individual states. This decentralization laid the foundation for the modern state system and marked the beginning of a new era in international diplomacy. The 30 Years' War reshaped the political and religious landscape of Europe, setting the stage for future conflicts. It serves as a stark reminder of the devastating effects of war. But it also teaches us about resilience, about the capacity of societies to adapt and evolve, even in the face of unimaginable adversity.